Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we have the pleasure to unpack the healing power of human-animal contact with our special guest from Green Chimneys, Dr. Ed Placke, Executive Director, Zachary Staszak, Director of Recreation, and Kristin Licardi, Associate Executive Director of Behavioral Health of Green Chimneys. I'm so happy to be here with you all.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
For sure.
So Green Chimneys was founded and launched in Brewster, New York in 1947 on a 75-acre farm. It was founded by a 19-year-old, the power of youth, Sam Ross. And a year later, Sam served just under a dozen students aged 3 to 6. And you have really evolved over these years. I mean, it's just amazing what you do today. So, Ed, could you fill up some of the gaps here and give us a sense of the scope of your operations? The scope even of your facilities is huge.
Yeah, I think it's important to harken back to Dr. Sam Ross as a 19-year-old who had this vision of having a school on a farm. He often spoke to me before he passed away several years ago about his interest in residential schools. And in the 1940s and 50s, he indicated they were not good places for children. And he thought being closer to nature could have a positive impact on children. So when we started out, and it has evolved over the last 75 years, he was working with 3 to 6-year-olds, government officials, musicians, actors, UN representatives would send their little children here while they were traveling the world doing their craft. Eventually, years later, it evolved into kids being placed by the courts, particularly out of New York City and some of the surrounding counties. And now, 75 years later, our children are referred by their local school district. All of our children have disabilities. The children have mental health diagnoses. A great portion have academic challenges. The average IQ is 100. So, for example, we have a graduating class, and it's not every child going to college. We have many children going to college. We have a number of children going to vocational schools and children going right to the world of work. So that has been an evolution over the last 75 years. And we're 212 kids on our main campus. 102 children live with us, and 150 children commute every day. We also have a smaller campus, about 20 minutes from our main campus, that has 40 children. So in total, it's about 252 children at capacity. But because we have open enrollment, we see 320 kids per year, somewhere in that range. But when you did the introduction, you talked about the human-animal interaction as being really central to Green Chimneys. I think back in 1994, Dr. Ross was named by Mr. Rogers as the #1 child advocate in the country. And PBS did a special that 10 million people viewed it, which was very significant in 1994. We didn't really have cable and all these other streaming systems. And what Dr. Ross said, and it's resonated with me, Mark, for the 7 years almost I've been here, is that it seemed kooky, and he used the word kooky, initially when he believed that animals and nature would regulate the behavior of children. And the opposite, children would help regulate animals. And here we are 75 years later, it's common knowledge. The research is really straightforward. You see animals in hospitals, in nursing homes, in schools, in nursery schools. So he was way ahead of his time. He was a visionary. So when you think of Green Chimneys, think of a complex organization that has 2 schools, has a residential program. Obviously, we have children who commute, but also provides treatment to children. And if it was just their academic issues, they wouldn't be here. So it's really the social, emotional challenges children have that cannot be met in a public school or a BOCES or any other type of private school. This is really the last stop for many of our children. And I think Kristin can give you a really good sense of what the overall treatment looks like. But the animals are only a piece to that. There's the academic, there's the recreational, there's the social emotional. And that's why we have my 2 colleagues here, Zach and Kristin, as you know, veterans to Green Chimneys, and really top of the class in regard to recreation and social service. So I am really pleased and proud for them to be part of this terrific team.
I'd like to pose a really tough question to both Zach and Kristin, because in our society, everything is tied to resource, and it shouldn't be. We have a number of children who need help, and you provide the help, right? You also have an operating budget. Zach, Kristin, how should we come together to help children who need help? And what is the value of a child? And how should we come together to ensure that that child is supported financially and with attention, with the kind of skills that you both bring and that the people of Green Chimneys bring? How should we function? How can you be a model for all of us? Zach, you want to take this first, and then Kristin?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think about our recreation opportunities that we provide for our kids, and a lot of it comes down to, I mean, especially when it comes to recreation, a lot of these kids have not had a lot of opportunities recreationally in their lives. I mean, maybe, whether it was, they just didn't have, they lived in the city, there wasn't a lot of recreation around them, but if they had municipal, things in their community, where they, maybe a kid tried out a youth sport, they weren't successful, whether or not they were, athletic enough, or, their behavior, social interactions were not where they needed to be. And then, they got kind of pushed out of those programs, and, families feel isolated. So, when we bring kids into our care, a lot of them have just not had these recreation programs. So we have to take a lot of time to build them back up, and we try to offer as many different opportunities as we possibly can to our kids. I mean, we have adventure programming, we high ropes, climbing tower, we have the great swamp that's across the street. So this wetland area that we do canoeing and fishing and a lot of stuff. We talk about the human and animal interaction piece that we have here, but we try to bring our nature-based programming out to a lot of different ways. We want to keep the kids outside as much as possible. We want to, really give them these opportunities while they're here. And, it's not, it's funny, you give them these opportunities, but it's not like every, kid is going to have a high ropes course to go to, once they get discharged from here. But there's a lot of skills and, a lot of confidence that we can build, through climbing programs, through all these different programs that we offer for the kids. So,
So what you're describing is what every child should have access to, right?
Absolutely. And the thing I see with youth sports, especially, I mean, I've got my own kids now. I see a lot of it is very much broken down by age group and very limited to age. And they're not, a lot of communities are not looking into, breaking things down by ability levels and, kids, all the different kinds of needs, kids need to be involved in programs. And, so that's really what it comes down to. I mean, we run our sports programs here, athletic programs. We've got some, kids from our elementary school playing right alongside with our kids from, the high school. So, I mean, we take very much a big brother, little brother kind of mentality with it. We're really trying to integrate our kids, as much as possible.
So, Kristin, when we look at what Zach's talking about, we're talking about a model experience that all children should have access to. And these are children who have basically been shunted aside because it's more challenging for the adults to deal with them, right? It's more challenging for society to deal with them. You're creating a healing environment in which you're engaging. How do you feel about this? And should we actually be looking at your model as a model for the rest of us, for society? Are we caring about the right things, in other words?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate. Like, we feel very grateful working here in terms of the resources that we have. We definitely don't take them for granted that, we're able to work in an environment with kids that most of them have not had any exposure to. We have resources here, and we have a lot of different resources. Even just you think about the space that we have, the outdoor space and all the different interventions that we can do here. And it's unfortunate that kids have to wait until they get to this level of need to really access these kinds of services. So, most of the kids, by the time they get here, they've already failed everywhere else. So communities certainly are struggling. I mean, and I don't want to get into a turn this into a conversation about politics, right? Because I think there's a lot of things in our environment out there that sort of impact who has access to what. You think about things like managed care and all those things. I mean, they even impact us, in terms of when a kid can start to access. So, I mean, I would love to see, just public schools even potentially being able to start to do some different kinds of intervention like we've been able to do here that, just really out of the box, not the typical. And I think even just collaborating a bit in our recent human-animal interaction conference with folks really all over the world that came here to experience Green Chimneys, but it was really amazing how many of them are operating, in communities, whether it's schools or community-based kinds of programming, without a lot of resource, without a lot of funding, just like the desire to really get to kids on a different kind of level. So that was really kind of invigorating for me to be around and to see that there are people out there that also have similar desires to meet kids where they're at in a different kind of way than maybe our typical programs in schools and communities do.
Okay. So Ed, you and your team and Sam created this environment in which you could be a laboratory, and people like Mr. Rogers, this whole idea of how children can evolve and absorb information and how compassion actually functions. You're trying to model this. Talk a little bit about the human animal piece of this, because when you're dealing with animals, you get beyond the words. So we're bound by words. We're bound by certain ways of behavior. But when you're talking to animals, you become unbounded by that, and you have to behave in a different way, and you're interacting in a different way. How important is this to your program?
Huge. Sorry, Ed, that's for you. I couldn't help it.
Kristin, you were born here, so you need to talk about all of this.
I mean, obviously, like like Zach said, it's not only animals, but I do think that just, why knowing what we know about nature-based and human-animal interaction, knowing what we know in terms of all the research that's been done on the impact on not just kids, but just people in many different settings and many different populations. I mean, we know these things to be true, right? We know that just being in the natural environment has benefits in and of itself, right? We know that it boosts mood. We know that it decreases stress. We know that it has genuine positive impact on physical health, and we know a lot about the interaction of humans and animals and the impact on it. Does provide sort of a less threatening way of learning, right? Both whether you're talking about academics or social emotional skills or relationship skills, right? A lot of our kids are really vulnerable and are easily triggered by interactions with other people, maybe, right? But when you sort of take that out of the mix and they're just allowed to kind of be themselves and feel completely unjudged and accepted by another being, it's really powerful. And
the animal itself is vulnerable, right? So all of a sudden, the vulnerable person becomes the more powerful person in that environment. The vulnerable person becomes the caretaker in that environment. The vulnerable person becomes the person on whom that animal depends for their sustenance and happiness, right, Ed?
We have many, many examples on a daily basis. I mean, I look out my window, I have students walking alpacas, hanging out with camels, riding Clydesdales. But what I've noticed in the school, we have a large number of kids who have a favorite animal. They become dysregulated. They become emotionally stimulated. They need something to regulate them. And many of them ask, can I hang out in the pig pen with a pig that I like? Can I walk the llama? Can I hang out with the bald, or can I watch the bald eagle? Probably not get in the cage with the bald eagle, but watch the bald eagle. And I think, as Kristin said, there's that unconditional support, respect. You're not in a judgment zone where our kids are being judged, all kids, never mind those with it, are being judged every 30 seconds in a school environment. So I think the farm, but as Zach said, it's not only the farm. We have a large lake on one of our campuses. We have a mountain. We have trails. We have organic gardens. This is because not every kid likes animals. So there are certain places they love to go that provides them with some of that relief. So that's something I've been very impressed with here at Green Chimneys.
Now, once a young person goes through your programs and experiences the programs, the recreational programs that you provide, Zach, the various behavioral health programs that you manage, Kristin, that your staff provide, what happens as they near the time when they are going to exit the school and no longer be in this protected environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we've actually had put a lot of focus on just in the last year. I mean, we've created this whole, try and like a discharge packet for the kids when they're going back into their communities. We really try to sit down with them, like, here are all your options. Here's your local library. Here's what they offer. Here's if you're getting involved, you're going back to your school district, let's look at your school district. Let's see, what athletics you might be able to get involved with, or what clubs you might want to get involved with. So we try and, sit down with the kids before they're leaving and really try and, get a plan ahead of time, get their leisure, a leisure plan ahead of time, because, we're integrating them back in the community. The school only goes for so long. There's after school programs, there's other programs, if we can get them, to be successful in that, I think we got a great thing going. I mean, we've had some kids, leave here, go on to play lacrosse in their high school, go on to play, football at their local high school. When I hear, when I see those kids that come back at our alumni days, it's amazing to see, So I think a lot of it, but I mean, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the things we're trying to do is going to, transition, we're working on team building here. Maybe if they didn't get involved in team sports when they're growing up, we do a lot of team building stuff with them here to try and just, and that's going to roll over. If they're graduating from here, they're going into a workplace environment, they've got to work, work as a team, learn how to collaborate with people. I mean, that's a guiding principle at Green Chimneys too, is our collaborative culture. So that's really what we're trying to emphasize with the kids too. So
you're conveying executive function skills.
Mm-hmm.
Conveying organizational skills, you're conveying emotional connection skills, compassion, all these different aspects. Kristin, how long do the young people generally stay at Green Chimneys? What does that sort of trajectory look like? Yeah,
it's different whether you're in our day program or our residential program. Right now, for our residential program, our average length of stay is a little over 2 years, which is pretty high for a residential setting these days, I would say. And we definitely have been reducing and are moving toward a much lower, because we know that the longer kids are separated from family and community, generally speaking, the worse their outcomes. So that, again, there's so many factors involved, but we're always really working on having treatment become really more efficient. And again, working on that transition that you and Zach were talking about, really working on that from day one, not waiting until the last few months before they go, but sort of always having that end goal in mind and making sure that whatever we're doing, we're really looking to bridge it. Because we know we are a bubble here at Green Chimneys. We know that this environment, this setting, all the resources, all the staff that we have here, like, that's just not reproducible in the real world, once they leave. So our goal is really, how do we get them to the point where they have the skills to kind of move forward with not as much environmental, support and control, and similarly their families. Our day students stay about an average of just over, I think it's about 3.5 years, the last I looked. Does that sound right? And that one is very different. Kids are still living at home in their community. They're just bused here by day. Generally speaking, if we can get them to a less restrictive school setting, we are moving them. And for some of them, this is their ideal school setting. So those kids may finish their high school career and graduate here, and that's definitely a success, regardless of how long they might be in our school program.
Yep, sure. And Mark, I think what's important to note, and I share this with parents, we're not a boarding school. So you're not here, at least on the residential side, for your entire academic career. And I also like to share with them that our job is to help get the kid across to the bridge to adulthood. So you could be a fifth grader here doing really well, going back to your middle school in the community as a sixth grader. You could be a ninth grader in a residential program and stepping down to the day program, or you could graduate. But the day you walk in and enroll, that's when we start thinking, what's the next step to get back to the community? So I just want to underscore the power of the community, and that's where Kristin's team comes in. They've done a really good job with that transition piece. And I'm really proud to say we have 20 plus graduates this year, which we range from anywhere from 10 to 20, somewhere in that range. We have a child going to Fordham, we have a child going to Hunter, and we have a child going to, I think it's Stony Brook. I mean, 3 pretty darn prestigious colleges. So I think between the family and us, we've done a pretty good job with those youngsters. But most of our graduates are day students. We have a handful of youngsters who are residential, but our goal is to have them graduate with their friends in the community. And we've been pretty successful with that at this point.
How do you know when a young person is ready to exit the environment and become an alumni? In other words, not be actually part of your current day students or residential students?
Yeah.
How do you know? What is the sign?
Yeah, I mean, so we do a lot of things to try and measure that, because it can often look very different for different kids and different families. So when kids come in, we develop treatment plans for them. And they also have individualized education plans through their school district, so IEPs, all of which have objectives and goals that we set with the youth and their family from the beginning, in terms of like, what really are we hoping to achieve to be able to get them back into that less restrictive setting. So setting those things from ahead of time, and then we look at those measurable goals and objectives, at least quarterly while they're here, to sort of gauge like, okay, where are they at? We also do a what's called a CANS assessment, or a child and adolescent needs and strengths, which really just measures a whole scope of different things in terms of how they're functioning at point A, and we do that on an annual basis. And then we also do some satisfaction surveys for our parents, for our kids, for our school districts, to kind of measure like, how do they think we're doing with this stuff? But in general, it's looking at the goals to see like, have they met those goals? And then really working with families and districts, because the barriers, they may even meet the goals, but then they might be coming from a community that has very low resource. Maybe they don't have a school setting that this kid is going to be successful in, or maybe they don't have easy access to counseling or psychiatry and they're on medication. Maybe their families are very hesitant to take them home. There could be a whole lot of things that get in the way that we would be really working with them to try to figure that stuff out, versus just saying, hey, your goals are met, time for you to go, see ya. We really try to work with them to make sure that, again, we don't want to see them come back here just on alumni day. We don't want to see them come back for admission. We want to make sure that when they go, they're set up for, as best we can for success, and not needing us anymore.
And how do you deal with the financial wherewithal, assembling the resources here? How are you funded?
All right, the funding is fairly straightforward. and that all but one of our 248 children are referred by the local school district through the Committee on Special Education. So as Kristin mentioned, every child has an individual education plan. And essentially the district is responsible for the tuition rate for the day school. And the district, to a lesser degree, and the county are responsible for the residential rate. However, the districts and counties are reimbursed 2 years after the fact. So the wealthier the district, the less the reimbursement. So if you're coming out of the Bronx, it might be 90 cents on a dollar that you are, because the Bronx is the poorest county in the state. That would be probably 90 cents on a dollar. If you're in Lower Westchester, which right outside of the 5 boroughs, it could be 30 cents on the dollar. But our budget is 98% state and local dollars. We get some federal dollars, very small amount of federal dollars. We have Medicaid as well, which is shrinking up dramatically. So when you think of our budget, we need to probably fundraise about $2 million a year to just about break even. So it is so to provide these complex, sophisticated services is quite expensive.
Ed, I'll go back to my original question. Do you think that in this society, in America writ large, are we paying enough attention to kids?
Yeah, I really do, because there are safeguards. As far as school district concerned, parents have a lot of autonomy during this process. It's really parent driven when you look at the federal and state regulations. So again, a youngster is referred to us, but prior to that, there typically is a lot of discussion with the family, the child in many cases, as well as the school district. So I think there are some fail-safe measures to protect children. So yeah, I think we're in fairly good shape at this point. Could we use more to support some of these programs? Absolutely. But in my 41 years in education, we've made significant progress. So that has worked out well. However, what I will underscore, if you work in the private sector, even though we're funded by public dollars, we're not considered a public school. We compete with public schools for staff, and we're not in the retirement system. We don't have the benefits in most cases public schools have, and we don't get the salaries. So staffing, particularly with the advent of COVID, has been a big challenge for us. And we're just kind of getting out of it at this point, but we cannot compete with the public sector, which at times really puts us behind the 8 ball.
What's next for Green Chimneys?
So in my 24 years, I've gotten to watch us really shift and grow. I think that's one of our strengths, that we have really been able to kind of see the writing on the wall, like, right, what's going on in the larger environment and what are the needs, and then sort of shifting the services that we provide to fit that. So I know, I mentioned like length of stay. We know that right now the residential program, there's a lot of them closing around us for a lot of different reasons, that, there really is a push to have more in the way of community-based services, which Green Chimneys does have an array of community-based services. So I know right now, like, we're really paying attention, one, I think, to making sure that we remain the best of the residential programs, and we continue to have really unique features to our program that other people can't replicate, so that there's always going to be kids that will need that higher level of care, and we will be there to keep delivering high quality there. And then I think really looking at what we're providing in the way of community-based services, including how we support the kids that leave from our either leave our residential and or are here in our day program, how do we help support them in the community, and are there other things that we could do? So that is, I think, some of the future direction that we'll be headed in for sure.
And Mark, I think what Kristin is indicating, that was Dr. Ross's vision. He was an absolute visionary. Keep in mind, he started with 3 to 6 year olds who were non-disabled, and then eventually evolved in, as I mentioned, court place, CSC. Now we're looking at more community-based. So we're not a static organization, and it's important to look at the market. What's the need in the community? And we're seeing more and more, as Kristin said, CBS. So again, the community-based service, so we can keep kids in the home with the family, to avoid foster care, to avoid residential placement, maybe even avoid special education and keep families together. So I think Dr. Ross would be very proud of us, the direction we're taking at this point.
Well, this has been really phenomenal. Zach, you want to have the last word on what the future will bring for kids?
I was just kind of thinking how, with our programming, we really are trying to, keep ahead of it, keep going with kids' interests. They're always shifting. All of a sudden, there's a huge interest in Dungeons and Dragons. So now we're on that kick. We're always trying to figure out what the kids are interested in, get them engaged, get them involved, really get them out there. You can go to any kind of recreation service that we provide. We do all the athletics, we do art therapy, we do rec therapy, we do adventure program, but then there's just kids want to play video games. So how do we make video games social, interactive, get the kids together? Yes, video game is not going to be good if it's one kid playing for hours by himself, but if we get a bunch of kids in the same room playing a game, it's really, we're trying to really just stay dynamic and stay with what our kids need and what they're interested in. So get them engaged, get them out there.
You're so right on this point. We have some requirements in education: reading, writing, arithmetic, very dry stuff, right? Learning facts. But then you have the social emotional stuff, the physical stuff, the teaching empathy, taking care of each other, the evolution of families and their knowledge of how to interact with their children who might be facing challenges. Dr. Ed Placke, Executive Director of Green Chimneys, Staszak, Director of Recreation, and Kristin Licardi, Associate Executive Director of Behavioral Health of Green Chimneys. Thank you so much for sharing the experience that you have with us. And please thank your staffs, your parents, your community, your funders, and those who really collaborate with you to create this healing environment for so many young people.